Democrats in Congress and also by President Obama, who has put forth, I think, a very solid program, gives the students an opportunity. This is a very interesting chart here, Mark, and I think it's one that you're aware of, and I know you've paid off your loan now, but that student hasn't.
I did actually take on some more debt to get my master's degree before I came here. 2 years before I came to Congress, I completed my master's degree. So I do have, and it was a 2-year master's program. I didn't, because of my income as a teacher, many years as a teacher but I accumulated close to $40,000 worth of debt that I'm paying off to the Federal Treasury. But it's not the Stafford loan that's subsidized. So
it's not the subsidized loan.
But I have a sense of just, and that's part of my horror of the amount of debt load that students are carrying.
Well, then you're one of these students, ex-student, $1 trillion. This number, the total student loan, is well over $1 trillion today. This is greater than the total credit card debt of every American. So we're looking at a situation where student debt is now larger than the credit card debts of all Americans. This is an enormous burden. But what this also does, and perhaps you have not only personal experience but other, is that when a student graduates, their first obligation is to pay off this debt. This cannot be, you can't go into bankruptcy. This debt's going to follow you with or without bankruptcy. You've got to make these payments. Now, last year we passed a bill that tends to modify how much you can pay. I think it's no more than 10%. The President's proposal takes that further and applies the 10% not just to the new loans that are taken out, but to all existing loans, so that as your income from a teacher, you would be required to pay no more than 10% of your income to pay down this debt. But if this debt has an interest rate of 3.4%, well, you can get it paid off more quickly. But if it's 6.8%, it's going to take longer and be more difficult.
The compounding effect on that amount of debt is going to seriously add to those students who will take, say, public service jobs or jobs in teaching or jobs in the public sector, nonprofits. It will severely limit the kind of employment that young people might seek out. Anyway.
Well, certainly that, and then a young person graduating from college, sometimes they want to get married. May have to delay that. They want to form a household, buy a house, rent a house, buy the furniture. They can't because they got to pay this off first.
Well, it certainly hurts our economy in that way. They're going to delay buying a car. They're going to delay buying a home. They're going to delay starting a family with this debt overhang. Beyond the interest rates, I also believe we need to also focus on lowering the principal, making sure we support our public higher ed our institutions of higher ed, our public institutions, to make sure that the principal isn't there. But certainly, I support our caucus's effort to keep interest rates from doubling. It's a very sad fact to say that doing nothing, if we don't get our way, that doing nothing is actually better than what the Republicans propose.
I'm going to put up another chart here that speaks to what you just said. This chart talks about our colleague's proposal. That was one that we passed here. We like to say that this is really about making education more expensive, and here's how it works. Our proposal is to keep the interest rate, and this is a person that's maxed out. They've borrowed the maximum amount from the Stafford loan. This is the subsidized portion of it. And this is the total interest that they pay over 5 years of a subsidized loan. The proposal that we put forward would be $4,174 of interest. What's going to happen unless we pass a law is that number will go to $8,808. That's the doubling of the interest rate from 3.4 to 6.8%. Now, the thing that I'll never understand, and this bill passed the House of Representatives a couple of months ago, was the proposal by our Republican colleagues that would actually force the students to pay more than just the doubling. You go, well, what's that all about? Why would they do that? And so under the proposal that we say actually makes education more expensive, the Republican proposal would go to $10,109 as opposed to our proposal, which would keep it at $4,174, or even allowing the rate to double. The Republican proposal is actually more expensive. It doesn't make sense. I would say nonsense is probably a better way of describing no sense, but it just creates a serious problem. Now, the proposal that the President has made is somewhere between these two numbers, actually just a little over $4,000. And that proposal is based on a 10-year note, the 10-year bond, Treasury bond, that would then set the floor. This one is also based on a Treasury bond. That's the GOP proposal. But it is like an adjustable rate mortgage on your home, so that every year as the interest changes, you're going to pay more and more. And we know that right now interest rates were, just 3 weeks ago, at an all-time low. But now you're looking at a situation where we're looking at those interest rates going up, and the Republican proposal would automatically adjust upward. It's one of the adjustable rate mortgages that got this country into such great trouble. I noticed that Rush Holt is here from New Jersey. Excuse me, Russ. But New Jersey, Russ Holt, please join us. I know that this is an issue that's very important to you. If I recall correctly, you represent a university. What is that university?
Represent a number of students in university, students who have been to university, and students who hope to go to university, for whom this is very important. As a member of the Education and Workforce Committee, I was involved in writing the legislation that resulted in the current lower interest rate. So it is, I take this very personally for all sorts of reasons. And as you point out, there are a number of problems with what is about to happen and what the majority Republican Party is proposing here with adjustable rates that could trap students or former students with unmanageable debt. But what bothers me the most is why they are doing it. Why they are doing it. The point is they are trying to raise revenue without appearing to raise taxes. They are unwilling to ask a fair share from people in this economy who are doing well, and instead want to turn to students and recent graduates and ask them to balance the budget, to reduce the deficit. And so that's why the interest rates are going up. It is so that they can collect more money, and they are collecting it, they would be collecting it from students. Just as you've been discussing, just the wrong thing to do for an economy that is going to create new jobs, new job entry, create economic growth.
Let me see if I understand what you were saying. The Republican proposal, which has passed the House of Representatives, is over in the Senate and hopefully will die there. By their proposal of allowing an adjustable rate on the student loan, they will actually bring money into the United States Treasury to reduce the deficit, or are they going to use that money for education?
Oh, this is a very definitely a revenue-raising measure because they have this hard and fast principle against collecting revenue from people who can afford to pay it and who are doing well.
Well, we certainly have seen this many, many times over here on the floor. And Mark, you may want to comment on this.
Well, you know, I want to take a little different slant on this, if I might, John and Rush. I actually want to turn to a topic, and the reason why I want to turn to this topic is because of what the Senate is doing, what it was doing yesterday and today. They're considering the comprehensive immigration bill. And of course, in that comprehensive immigration bill is a provision on the Dreamers. But the point you're making about the Republican attempt to raise revenue without straightforwardly asking for it and put on the burden of our students, our young people, we wouldn't have to do this if this House will follow suit and pass a comprehensive immigration bill. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to make an economic argument for why comprehensive immigration is good for our country and our economy. Thanks, as the debate continues on immigration reform, the effect that fixing our immigration system would have on our economy is becoming quite clear. Opponents of immigration reform don't seem to understand the benefits of our broken system. Many of the undocumented immigrants in this nation are already working, yet because of their legal status, they are forced to pay into the underground economy with no labor protections and no way to pay into the system. We should allow these individuals to come out of the shadows and put them on the pathway to citizenship. As an example, say there's an undocumented worker in my district. Because he or she is undocumented, that worker may only be making $4 or $5 an hour instead of the California minimum wage of $8 an hour. If comprehensive immigration reform is passed, the law will mandate that all workers be paid minimum wage, which will in turn increase their buying power, raise revenues for businesses, and drive up wages for everyone else, thus increasing our GDP growth rate. Not needing to have to resort to these tricks of variable interest rates on our students to raise revenue for our government. Recent analysis by the Social Security Administration showed that without comprehensive immigration reform, our annual growth rate would only be 4.5%. But with comprehensive immigration reform, our annual growth rate shoots up to 6.1%. This increase in GDP is going to have a tremendous effect on our job market. Earlier this year, Republican Senator Marco Rubio sent a letter to the Social Security Chief Actuary asking for an analysis of the legislation. In his response, Chief Actuary Goss said that the Senate's immigration reform proposal would create 3.2 million jobs by 2024. New jobs. In his reply, Chief Actuary Goss also said, quote, "We estimate a significant increase in both the population and the number of workers paying taxes in the United States as a result of these changes in legal immigration limits," end quote. 3.2 million new jobs by 2024 is a serious jobs plan for America. A report by the Cato Institute analyzed the data and estimates that there will be a $1.5 trillion increase in 10 years to household income. The middle class has been struggling for some time as their wages have remained stagnant for 30 years. The squeeze on the middle class has forced average American families to go heavily into debt just to get by. Mortgage payments, college loans, and the cost of health insurance have all skyrocketed, but wages have barely increased. Passing comprehensive immigration reform will help close this gap. The more people we have working and the more they consume means that our federal deficit will come down at an estimated, get this, $875 billion over 20 years. But it doesn't stop there. Social Security itself is going to benefit greatly as well. As some 75 million baby boomers prepare to retire, the immigrant community, which is generally younger than the overall population, will help the balance sheet by bringing in more revenue to offset retirees taking out benefits. It's been estimated that comprehensive immigration reform will add $4.6 trillion net to Social Security over the next 75 years. The problem we face with Social Security is the ratio of workers to retirees. 60 years ago, there were 16 workers for every retiree. 20 years from now, when the last of the baby boomers retire, that ratio will be down to 2.5 to 1 unless we pass comprehensive immigration reform. Comprehensive immigration reform is going to help Social Security in several ways. First, most new immigrants who come to the United States are between the ages of 18 and 35. For decades, these working immigrants will be contributing to Social Security. Second, few come to the United States with their parents, and the seniors that do come aren't eligible for Social Security. And finally, immigrants tend to have more children than native-born Americans, and their offspring will also pay into the system for decades to come. The numbers don't lie. Comprehensive immigration reform will improve our nation in many different ways, but especially economically. The time is now. Thank you.
You know, I thank the gentleman for presenting those numbers, because it's been in the news recently that the immigration bill would actually reduce the deficit. And I'm sure a lot of people around the country scratched their head and said, how could that be? But you've made it quite clear. It actually improves the economy in several different ways, just as making college more affordable improves the economy. And the result is we are all more prosperous. The result is the deficit goes down. The result is we all have improved quality of life.
It's very interesting. Mr. Takano, you're absolutely correct about the role of immigration and the comprehensive reform. There are some pieces that we often talk about, the dreamers, the young men and women that came here as children, brought here, they don't have their papers, but they also do not have the opportunity to really get the kind of education. So we have the dreamers. But here's what I think Mr. Holt was talking about that's really important, and this is part of what you were saying, Mr. Takano, about immigration reform, access to all the benefits of the economy, and what it means. If you happen to be a person that has less than a high school education, which is where you started your discussion on the Immigration Act, you're taking a look at perhaps as high as 14% unemployment, and the average median, or the, excuse me, not average, but the median weekly earnings less than $500 a week, $451 a week. If you get a high school degree, you may get $638, the median weekly income, but you're still looking at 9.4% unemployment. Now, and here's where the issue of education comes in at the post-high school education, and here's where the Stafford loan issue comes in. If you're able to go to college and get that bachelor's degree, your income is going to be more than doubled if you don't finish high school, and nearly doubled what you would have if you were able to finish high school. So getting that education, and this is part of the immigration issue, and it's the facts that you were laying out so very well, Mr. Takano. If you're able to get that education with borrowing money, a Stafford loan, subsidized or unsubsidized, and with a low interest rate, you're going to be looking at a median weekly earnings of well over $1,000. And your unemployment rate will be less than 5%. You go on and get that professional degree, and here's where you, in your own history, have been able to get that professional degree, that master's degree. You're looking at $1,600 median weekly income, and the unemployment rate is down. So here you begin to see not only how immigration fits into education, but how an individual, an immigrant or not, will be able to improve their life, and as they improve their personal life, they are improving the economy. They're bringing greater wealth to the economy, greater productivity, effectiveness, and efficiency to the economy. All of this is dependent upon an immigration reform, as you pointed out so very well as how we finance education. Now, if we allow these situation that's going to occur in just 5 days. In just 5 days, we're coming up against a crisis for the education and for those men and women, immigrants or not, that want to get an education, that want to move beyond high school. They're looking at a doubling, at least 6.8% of their interest rate on their loans, on the Stafford loans. And so they're going, well, maybe I can't finish college. Maybe I can't even start, and maybe I'm not going to be able to get that master's degree or that doctorate. where I know that I will be able to be more productive to the economy and earn a higher living. So these things fit together, and I thank you so very much for pointing out the way in which the immigration issue fits into this. And we really must have comprehensive immigration reform.
Well, it's my pleasure. It could be additional. You had 7 points to our economic agenda. Really, comprehensive immigration reform should be the 8th one. And, you know, the wealth of our country really is in the skills and knowledge of our people. We need to find a pathway for 11 million people, have them come out of the shadows, have a pathway to citizenship, and that tied together with investments in their skills and knowledge really raises up really the true wealth of our country, which is in its people, which is in her people.
Well, this is the Make It in America agenda, and as you say, you could easily add to this immigration reform. As one of the things that we need to do, these men, men and women, some 12 million that are here without documents, are unable to really rise up into these more highly skilled jobs. In many ways, their educational opportunities and their children's educational opportunities may be limited. This is the fundamental investment in any society, and giving access to people with that education, immigrant or not, allows us to build the American economy.
And so much of the focus, as you say, does go back to education, the need to find effective ways to educate all the immigrant children. If you could leave that poster up just a little longer. I mean, the investments we need to make in our basic scientific research to make sure we have the basic scientific research, the scientists. The scientists are so important. It takes years and years of developing people to become these highly skilled, highly knowledgeable scientists who will create, in turn, the inventions, the technology that will transfer into our preeminence in trade. You know, we're a great country because we are so great at patents. We're so great at creating new medications. This all comes from a highly educated workforce. And by the way, comprehensive immigration reform means we can draw in some of the best talent into Silicon Valley, the best talent into our pharmaceutical research labs.
But it's really true. The comprehensive immigration reform bill that's being discussed does bring into our economy those people that have the high skills, many of whom came here and got an education, but under the current law have to leave and go start their business in China, India, or somewhere else around the world. Part of that comprehensive immigration reform would allow those men and women that have taken their education in the United States, gotten their degree, the doctorate in engineering or electrical engineering or whatever, to stay in the United States. It turns out that in our state, California, the great engine of economic growth, some of it in Southern California with the entertainment industry and the way in which it is now merging into the electronic industry and all of the things that are going on with Google and the use of the smartphones for disseminating content, movies and the like. And in the Silicon Valley, many of those startup companies are immigrants. In fact, in the Silicon Valley, the majority of startups in the Silicon Valley are immigrants. A very interesting fact that goes back to the issue of immigration reform. We want to bring to America the talent. We want to be able to use in America these extraordinary workers and make sure that the education system, that then is the fundamental investment, they have access to it and that they're able to participate and move our economy forward.
Yeah, we all come from, most of us come from immigrant stock. I think you're Basque Italian.
That's true.
My forebears came from Japan. We ourselves are examples of the striving of generations, people who believed in getting, I'm pretty sure your parents as well as mine instilled the importance of education. It's the story of America, repeated over and over again, people coming here because they hear about the freedom, the way of life that we have, and the opportunity that our country represents. And much of it is embodied in our belief in education being the platform, the launching pad for entering the middle class. Certainly, this dream will be cut short if we don't watch out for things like doubling the interest rates or allowing interest rates to float, be tied to variable rates. And as Mr. Holt pointed out, he asserts that really it's a very sly way to try to raise revenue without actually being straightforward about it. It's a way to raise revenue on the backs of our children. I say, let's do sensible things, pass comprehensive immigration reform. It by itself, by the numbers I just showed, provide a tremendous amount of revenue to our government, simply by the fact that we bring so many, we harness the energy of so many aspirational people.
Well, all of that is true, and we've got 5 days. Congress of the United States has 5 days in which to make a fundamental decision about how we treat those who are participating in the most important investment that any society makes, which is the investment in education. Right now, we're asking most students to pay for their own education through loans, through some grants that are given through Pell Grants, but they've taken on an enormous amount of debt. Students in the United States have taken on $1 trillion of debt. A large portion of that debt is the Stafford loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. The loan rate on those programs are going to double from 3.4% to 6.8% in just 5 days, creating an enormous burden on the students who we rely on to grow our economy. They've made the investment. This society has made the investment in them. We need to free them so that they can participate more fully in our society, so that they can participate as consumers, so that they can participate as small business men and women, the entrepreneurs. All of this is possible if we take action, and we must. We owe it to those students. We owe it to the economy. We owe it to our ability to make it once again in America. All of these things come together, and the immigration reform, as you have pointed out, Mr. Tonko, that's Paul, the fellow that is usually with me from New York. Mark, I'm sorry.
You're not the only person that's done it.
But I really appreciate you being with us tonight, and I think we've pretty much closed off this subject. We'll be back next week to talk about making it in America, about jobs, and today we've talked about how education fits into the job agenda. And we've got 5 days to solve a very, very serious problem for millions of Americans who have got their education or just graduated that are now going to be faced with a doubling of their interest rates. We can do this. We have the power, we have the ability, and we have the proposals, the President's proposal, the proposal here from the Democrats. And we ask that those proposals be acted upon. Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back my remaining time.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentlewoman from Alabama, Ms. Roby, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to be here on the floor tonight with my colleagues to discuss a very, very important issue, and it's affordable energy. And, Mr. Speaker, like we did a few weeks ago, I just want to invite all of our constituents that might be paying attention right now that they can contact us at #AffordableEnergy. We're trying this as something new, Mr. Speaker, as a way to continue communication with those that we represent back home in an effort to answer very important questions about some of the things that we've read in the news recently today. And today this subject couldn't be any more important. That's because today President Obama, launched his latest assault in the war on coal. Those aren't my words. That's how President Obama's own climate advisor told the New York Times just hours before his speech today. And let me quote him. The one thing the President really needs to do now is to begin the process of shutting down the conventional coal plants. Politically, the White House is hesitant to say they're having a war on coal. On the other hand, a war on coal is exactly what is needed. A war on coal ultimately amounts to a war on American energy and a war on American families. And the regulations that President Obama announced today are unprecedented executive actions aimed at punishing industries critical to domestic energy production, particularly the coal industry. These regulations would not pass the United States Congress, not the Republican House, and not even the Democratic Senate. President Obama is trying to accomplish through executive regulations that which he cannot accomplish legislatively or electorally. He also again passed the buck on approving the Keystone Pipeline. This is a project that would create up to 20,000 jobs and increase domestic energy production, but a project that has been delayed because of regulatory approval for almost 4 years. Mr. Speaker, what strikes me the most about President Obama's aggressive unilateral actions is how out of touch he is with his administration are with the American people. So that's why we're here tonight. You know, I remind my constituents all the time that I'm a mom. I'm a mom, Riley's wife, and Margaret and George, my 2 kids. I'm putting gas in the car. I'm picking up carpool. I'm going to the grocery store. I see directly in my everyday life how these inflammatory statements and just in-your-face remarks to the American people that are going to be directly affected by this President's policies. And so I see it as milk prices increase, as gas prices go up, as domestic energy prices continue to skyrocket. This is just unacceptable. And so I'm joined by my colleagues tonight, and the gentleman from Colorado, I know he serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee and can certainly weigh in on these matters. But again, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind our constituents that it's #AffordableEnergy, and as we move through this leadership hour, we want to hear from you, our constituents back home, about the issues that are important to you when it comes to energy production in the United States of America.
Well, I thank the gentlelady from Alabama for her leadership tonight on this very important issue about the energy future of the United States. And Mr. Speaker, she is right. The conversation that we are having isn't something that's just occurring tonight on the House floor. It's not a conversation that's just occurring inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C. It's a conversation about energy that's happening in California, in Virginia, in my home state of Colorado. It's about a strong future for this country. It's about our children finding the kind of jobs and opportunity that we know they deserve, a kind of country that's growing stronger each and every day, better jobs and a stronger, growing workplace. And so tonight I hope that people, Mr. Speaker, around the country will send thoughts to #AffordableEnergy. Mr. Speaker, if they wish to join in that conversation, they'll be able to participate, and we can all see around the country what's happening with that conversation in their own homes, at their own dinner table tonight. #AffordableEnergy, and what it is that they are seeing, whether their utility rates are increasing, whether they have a job in one of the shale plays booming around the country, or perhaps they're trying to find work, and energy presents an incredible opportunity for them to do just that. So oftentimes in Washington, D.C., you see this fight break down between the House or the Senate or Republicans and Democrats, unnecessarily so. We ought to be focused on what's right for this country, not what's right for a political party, not what's right for this group or that group or favoring this special interest. It ought to be about what's good for the American people, the jobs that they're trying to hold on to, the college that they're trying to pay for their kids, to build a brighter future for their family. Because the conversation is one that we know isn't just about left or right. That's not what energy is. Energy is about how we can produce it here in the United States, what we can do in our own backyards to create a more vibrant future. All of us have our own energy experience, whether that's as kids when we were told by our parents, make sure you turn the light off before you leave the house. Go up and turn the light off in your bedroom before you go to school. Or whether it's today trying to find out, running a business, trying to make sure that we're using efficient computers to lower the cost of our utility bill year after year.
And I reached out specifically earlier today, Mr. Speaker, to my constituents on Facebook, and I've got a few examples of that. As you say, you know, everybody has their own energy story. Howard from Dale County, Alabama, pointed out that he's already struggling to make ends meet as is, especially with Obamacare and an increase in payroll taxes. Now the President wants to raise his electric bill. Susan from Montgomery, Alabama, said that the President just doesn't get it. She watched the President's speech today, and she doesn't understand why he won't focus on improving the economy instead of hurting it. She says the President doesn't have a clue how his policies actually affect the middle class. Spike, a young man from South Alabama, correctly pointed out that regulations have a trickle-down effect that are felt by hardworking Americans. These new regulations on energy sources will be felt by young Americans just like him. Kevin from Dothan, Alabama, works for the military and has recently been furloughed due to the President's sequester. And he worries about how rising energy costs would affect him, especially since he's already having to deal with less take-home pay. So Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my constituents' thoughts, and again, that's why we're here tonight.
Mr. Speaker, I'm Richard Hudson from North Carolina. I represent a district that's been hit very hard with job losses. People out there are really struggling. I go home every weekend. I travel my district. I talk to real people every day who are struggling to get by. I talk to folks who've lost their jobs either in the textile industry or the furniture industry. I've talked to folks who are just trying to keep their companies afloat. I talked to a home builder the other day who's just trying to keep enough work so that he doesn't have to lay off any more of his crew, so he can keep his skilled labor force there, so when the economy does pick back up, he'll have the folks that he needs to get the job done. People are really hurting out there, and there are some signs that the economy is getting better, but Mr. Speaker, in my district, we're just not feeling it yet. In fact, I was in Richmond County, North Carolina yesterday, and the folks there tell me that home foreclosures have increased this year over last year. And so we aren't out of this yet. And on top of this economy where folks are struggling and just trying to stay afloat, trying to keep their family food on the table and paying the bills, the President comes out today, 4 years to the day of when he introduced his disastrous cap-and-trade ideas, and comes up with this new scheme that's going to add cost to our energy. It's going to destroy jobs in this country. And it's just unconscionable. And the people in my district are wondering the same thing they are at other places around the country. Why doesn't the President understand what's going on here? And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to continue to fight for an energy policy that makes sense. You know, we've got energy off the shore of North Carolina that we ought to be going after. We've got huge reserves of oil and natural gas. We've also got potential for fracking in North Carolina. I want to get North Carolina in the energy business. I want to create those energy jobs in North Carolina like we've seen in western Pennsylvania and like we've seen in North Dakota and other places. And now's the time. Now's the time to start getting American energy sources, getting Americans in the energy game, not taxing and regulating our energy industry out of business, and not only destroying the jobs but increasing the cost of energy. And when the cost of energy go up, Mr. Speaker, everything gets more expensive, whether it's food, whether it's the cost of transportation of goods. It's hitting us really hard.
And I think that you bring up an excellent point about this issue of regulations, about how the President has spent all of this time developing incredibly onerous regulations that will increase the cost of electric generation. It will increase the cost to produce the electricity that each and every one of us use every day at home and our workplace. And yet it's taken years for him to develop this, and concentrating on this big announcement today, which will hurt American jobs. It will indeed impact negatively the middle class of this country. And yet there's a project out there like the Keystone XL pipeline that he could approve today, after mountains of paperwork has been completed, environmental impact studies completed. People could be put to work today on the Keystone Pipeline, instead of focusing on putting them out of work, instead of focusing on regulations that will hurt our ability to grow the economy, like the President announced today, his plans to disarm our energy plans in this country. But the fact is we could have a Keystone Energy Pipeline and a Keystone XL Pipeline putting people back to work. And people that I talk to back in my district strongly support the Keystone Pipeline. There are people in Colorado that I've heard from that don't support it. And one of the questions they lead with is, well, you know, Representative Gardner, it's not really going to create jobs here in Colorado. Well, you know what? We know, thanks to research that's been done, the impact of the Alberta oil sands development on U.S. state economies, done by a university, that in Colorado alone, the job increase thanks to the Alberta oil sands development, the Keystone XL Pipeline is a major part of this, that we would receive about 11,200 new jobs as a result of further development of the Alberta oil sands. In Colorado alone, that's 11,000 some jobs that we could benefit from because of the construction of the Keystone Pipeline and further development of the Alberta oil sands. In North Carolina alone, my colleague from North Carolina, 18,400 jobs could come from further development of the Alberta oil sands, the Keystone Pipeline being a critical part of that. And so today the President announces a plan to make it more difficult to generate electricity, to increase the cost of coal power generation. His top science advisor has said we need a war on coal. This is the President of the United States saying we need a war on coal. His administration saying that. And yet we have the opportunity today to say yes to a pipeline to create jobs in this country. So instead of putting people out of work, why don't we put people into work by approving things like the Keystone Pipeline?
Well, and I have with me just kind of a checklist here about this administration and President Obama's energy record, and you know, obviously delaying the job-creating Keystone Pipeline XL, as you've already mentioned, stopping job-creating natural gas exports, regulating oil and gas production on federal lands, investing in green energy failures. And Mr. Speaker, you can learn more about this at gop.gov/energy. And so we just you know, continue to focus on this here tonight with all of our colleagues that have joined us. A recent report from CBO came out that sought to find out just how higher energy costs would affect the economy. And the report said raising the cost of using fossil fuels would tend to increase the cost of producing goods and services, especially those requiring electricity and transportation. We've already mentioned that tonight. My friend from North Carolina, I was talking about being a mom and driving carpool and buying milk at the grocery store. It's very evident what's going on based on these policies. Higher production costs lead to higher prices for emission-intensive goods and services. Areas in the country where electricity is produced from coal, places like Alabama and other states represented here, would tend to experience larger increases in electricity prices than other areas of the country would. And specific to Alabama, 36% of electricity is produced from coal, the largest of any fuel source. And as for jobs in Alabama, it's the 6th nationally for total electricity generation. So, I mean, all of us have stories here tonight that are just right along these lines. We have an opportunity here as members of the House of Representatives to, whether it be through oversight on energy and commerce and other committees of jurisdiction, to rein in this, you know? I mean, that's our responsibility to our constituents, and that's what this conversation here tonight. Mr. Speaker, I just want to tell you again that #AffordableEnergy, if you want to know more or make a comment, Mr. Speaker, about what we are doing here tonight, #AffordableEnergy, and any of my colleagues that want to chime in, please do.
Well, I'd love to address this war on coal a little bit more. I just think it's outrageous that the President of the United States advisors say that the President wants a war on coal. You know, we ought to have a war on gas prices. We ought to have a war on energy prices. We ought to have a war on joblessness. I mean, these are the things that we should be concerned about and angry about and upset about. And, you know, you look at the fact that the United States has more coal than any country in the world. And we've got technology to use that coal for energy production in a clean way. Clean coal technology. liquefied coal. There are plenty of ways we can use that energy, Mr. Speaker, here in America, putting Americans to work to reduce our energy costs. And that's what we ought to be focusing on. And, you know, let's get Americans to work making American energy. Let's bring American energy costs down, and let's stop the war on jobs, which is what we're seeing from this administration.
Will the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
I would ask the gentleman if he doesn't agree with me that we would be much better off as a nation if we focused on a way to have affordable energy, clean coal technology, and not just have a war on coal and thus create those jobs that you were speaking of. Would you not agree with that?
Absolutely.
And I would say that, it's interesting that the President has taken this action to have a war on coal when his Department of Energy has been investing in some clean coal technology, maybe not as much as some of us would like, but some clean coal technology which right now appears to be on the cusp of actually yielding benefits. They're working right now in Alabama on a plant to test out a chemical looping formula. That chemical looping formula would produce coal ash and pure carbon dioxide. There's no carbon capture, it's just right there. There's no SOx, there's no NOx, there's no mercury, and there are lots of jobs. Now, while it's a little more expensive than conventional plants using coal to produce energy, if this technology works, that the administration has already invested in, we could have both clean coal, affordable energy, jobs, and still protect the environment. And one of the problems that I have, Mr. Speaker, is that so often people say, well, you can't have one and have the other. I believe the United States should be the leader in making sure that we develop and have available not only for companies in the United States but the entire world of clean coal technology, because if we don't look at this as a global problem, if we continue to say, well, we're just going to shut coal down in the United States, what we do is we send our jobs to places like India and China and Russia and Kazakhstan, and the list goes on, and they don't have the regulations that we even had in the year 2000 on the burning of coal. And all that stuff goes into the atmosphere, and guess where it goes? According to a NASA study, it takes 10 days to get from the middle of the Gobi Desert to the eastern shore of my beloved Commonwealth of Virginia. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we're talking about this, it's not a matter of choosing the environment versus coal. It's a matter of choosing America first and making sure we make America's coal affordable, usable, and clean, and we can do it.
Yes.
I yield to my good friend, my cousin, I'd like to say sometimes. Since I'm Representative Griffith, I'll yield to Representative Griffin.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd be proud to call you cousin. You know, when I look at this issue of energy, what strikes me is the President's talk about jobs sounds good, but he doesn't like this sort of job or that sort of job. For example, he talks about wanting to create jobs, but he doesn't want the Keystone Pipeline kind of jobs. He doesn't want the kind of jobs that come from coal. He doesn't want the kind of jobs that come from fracking, this technology that we have developed in the United States that is helping us lead the world. So he wants to talk about jobs. He has this idea that there are somehow these jobs out there, but not the ones that are right under his nose. I am holding in my hand a Washington Post article from earlier this year, and the headline is European industry flocks to U.S. to take advantage of cheaper gas. Wait a minute. I've heard the President talk a lot about jobs. I've heard him talk a lot about wanting more manufacturing jobs. Natural gas that is being developed here in this country, cheap natural gas, clean-burning natural gas, abundant natural gas. That is what is helping this economy despite all the regulatory obstacles that this President has put in front of this economy, despite record debt, despite all the problems that we in this body want to address. The economy is still doing some incredible things because the private sector is leading, and natural gas is a big part of that. I've got another article here from the Wall Street Journal from October of last year. The headline is, "Cheap U.S. gas is Europe's loss." Manufacturing in Europe moving to the United States because of innovation in the area of natural gas. Now, the interesting thing is, I know the President is in a political bind because workers want jobs and environmentalists want to kill a lot of these projects, so he's torn between the two. How about you just go with the jobs? Working Americans need jobs, Mr. President, and it seems to me those are the folks that you ought to put first. And I would note that there's a lot of talk by the environmentalists about killing coal and having a war on coal. Do they not realize that if you kill coal use in a country that regulates it very closely and that has developed clean coal, that coal's still going to be used? But who's it going to be used by? It's going to be used by China, where they don't have the clean air rules that we do, and so they're going to make even more pollution instead of turning to clean coal and the coal technology that we have here. He's sending it overseas.
And I don't think, I just want to chime in for a second. I think that it cannot be said enough in this chamber tonight that his war on coal is a war on American energy and American jobs, and that what you will see if this unilateral decision happens, you're going to see an outsourcing of manufacturing to places like China that are unregulated, when any of us in this room here, every time we travel our districts, are how come we can't bring the manufacturing jobs back to the United States of America? And it's these type of threats coming from this administration that are chasing jobs offshore left and right. And this is not what our economy can withstand right now.
This is another reason that folks may want to go elsewhere to create jobs. We've got the gift of abundant, cheap energy. Let's not mess it up. And let's be clear, this is not just a war on coal. This is a war on working people. This is a war on the family who are sitting at their table trying to figure out how they're going to pay their power bill, how they're going to heat or cool their home, how they're going to put food on their table. And you know what? Energy cost, we all know this, when it goes up, it's passed down through the cost of product. I will tell you that Arkansas, where I'm from, a big percentage of our energy is based on coal.
Well, and I don't think there can be any doubt that that's the President's intention under his plan that he announced today. The conversation, the focus tonight is about affordable energy. And there are people sending tweets around the country right now with the hashtag to affordable energy, hashtag affordable energy, about that very subject tonight. But if you listen to the pattern of statements the President has made over the past several years, from the time he was a candidate to his administration today. As a candidate, President, then Senator Obama, said, under my plan, energy rates will necessarily skyrocket. He said years ago that his energy plan was for energy rates to skyrocket. Just a few years later, when he nominated Secretary Chu to be Department of Energy Secretary, the Secretary of Department of Energy said he'd like to see gas prices around $8, European levels prices of gasoline, doubling what they are today. They're already too high, nearly $4 in Colorado. That's too high.
Well,
families can't afford it.
I don't understand. All of us have heard this President and this administration say repeatedly, I support an all-of-the-above approach to energy production. And then you try to promulgate a rule like what came out today and unilaterally, announce a war on coal, a war on American families, a war on jobs in the United States of America. And what reasonable individual would
put that with an all-of-the-above approach to energy production so that we can become independent in the United States of America. It makes no sense. We should hold this administration accountable for this. We in Congress have a job to make sure our constituents back home understand this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for jobs. It doesn't make sense for families. And we absolutely have to hold him to this.
Well, and let me say briefly that, you know, one of the interesting things I note is that when we were talking about this one time at the Energy and Commerce Committee, Lisa Jackson was in there, and we talked about regulating greenhouse gases and how that was going to make the cost of energy go up and people wouldn't be able to heat their homes in my district. And she said we have programs for that, but in the President's budget request this year, he cut the LIHEAP program, which is the assistance to folks who are having trouble making their heat bills and paying those bills. So while on the one hand the administration is going to make our electric bills go through the roof, on the other hand they want us to cut the assistance program that would help the poorest of the poor. That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it because they're really going to hurt American families.
And will you share, Mr. Gardner, will you share the testimony, because I've watched it and it's really powerful. You were questioning in the Energy and Commerce Committee about whether there's ever and you can tell the story better than I can because I've just watched the clip, any connection between the number of jobs that would be affected by the regulations that come down from the EPA?
Well, one of the most stunning things, of course, in the administration is their focus on regulations and a complete lack of focus on that regulation's effect on jobs. We had an assistant administrator of the EPA come and talk to the Energy and Commerce Committee about whether or not a regulation on energy production was good. And I asked a very simple question. And the question was whether or not there was a jobs analysis that was performed when they issued the regulation. Did they look at whether or not jobs would be impacted by this regulation? And after 5 minutes of what can only be described as a Abbott and Costello who's on first kind of conversation, the answer was clearly no, that this administration did not take into account the impact energy regulations would have on job creation. And so as we have a conversation with the country about an all-American energy plan, we have got to realize that not only does it impact the coal-fired power plant or the nuclear plant or the wind farm down the road, but it impacts our families' ability to afford a brighter future.
In the President's speech today, he basically made the case that more regulations and restraints on the energy sector, to your point, would be good for our economy and create jobs. Regulations creating jobs. I know none of us in here believe that, and I know we've never heard from one constituent that owns a business that regulations, more regulations, create jobs. And furthermore, this is the same president that tried to sell us Solyndra, and we're going to take this. We're going to take him at his word. It's really unbelievable.
Well, if I might add to the gentlelady's point, the gentlelady from Alabama, this administration has continually pushed the notion that the gentlelady is describing there, that regulations do create jobs. Their argument is that when they regulate our industries, when they regulate our local companies, when they regulate the local small businesses in our communities, that those businesses have to then hire people to respond to the regulations. Therefore, presto, this administration has created jobs.
But aren't those businesses supposed to be, I mean, they want to create products to then sell to the American people, not hire people to follow regulations.
So to the gentlelady's point, what this administration has done is created a country that is focused their job creation on bureaucracy and regulation and red tape. And so they're forcing debt on our kids and grandkids to pay for bureaucrats to come out to our communities to force our small businesses to hire people to respond to the bureaucrats. I mean, what a maddening system in a country where we are supposed to be the inspiration around the world, the land of hope and opportunity, and they are taking us towards becoming the land of regulation, the land of unemployment, the land of mandates and taxes, and all this together. It's no wonder that our unemployment rate is still almost 8% or 7.6%. It's the longest the unemployment rate's been this high since the Great Depression for this long. It is, and for this administration to say that this is somehow a job creation agenda, regulating our local businesses, regulating our energy costs, and driving up the cost of energy. And ultimately the sad point is, and the gentleman from Arkansas spoke to this a little bit ago, is that this is not just a war on a business. This is not just a war on an energy producer. This is not just a war on a coal company. This is a war on the American people. They are the victims in this. It is not the small business owner that's the victim. It's not it is the American people. It's the people struggling to pay their bills. It's the person on the fixed income. It's the single mom. It's the senior. It's someone whose energy costs are that big a portion of their monthly budget that this really hurts them in the pocketbook. It's that family that's trying to make life work. You know, they are the folks that ultimately get hurt in this situation. And so we have to stand up for the victims in this country, that silent majority that is being hurt by these anti-energy policies. And at the end of the day, that's why I join my colleagues to support an all-the-above energy approach, to put people back to work, to lower the cost of energy in this country, and to make us more secure by making us less dependent on foreign sources of energy.
And you know, I've got some good news for my colleagues here tonight.
But we need it.
And I'd like to lay this out and give the President the opportunity to digest what I'm about to say and change his mind on the Keystone Pipeline. We know that he's been torn between workers on one side and environmental extremists on the other, and he's been looking and grasping for any excuse not to approve the affordable energy, the jobs that come with the Keystone Pipeline. And you know, there's a lot of these same similar arguments, whether you're talking about coal or the Keystone Pipeline or the natural gas that we're getting out of the ground, that has really revolutionized this country and provided so many jobs for so many workers. But one of the reasons that opponents of the Keystone Pipeline have said that they're opposed to the Keystone Pipeline is that the tar sands that's coming out of being taken out of the ground in Canada, at its core, it's bitumen, which is a little bit different kind of crude. And a lot of them have said, well, you know, we're opposed to the Keystone Pipeline because it's different than other pipelines. This crude is different. This crude is more corrosive. This crude is dangerous. This crude should not be going through pipelines across this country because it's somehow more dangerous. Well, I've got great news for the President tonight if he's watching this. The great news is, in January of 2012, we put in a requirement in legislation that required the Obama administration, I want to be real clear about this, because this is breaking news, and it broke today. It hadn't gotten a lot of attention, but it's critical. We put in our bill that became law that the Obama administration needed to do a study through the Department of Transportation to determine whether this bitumen really was different than other crude. Well, it really was more dangerous to pass through a pipeline across the country, whether it was really something we needed to be extra worried about. Because all the environmentalists, all the different folks who oppose the Keystone Pipeline, they just preach about bitumen and how dangerous it is.
Well, I can't wait. What did the study say?
Here's the study, my friend, and this is just great news. The